Well,
I think we can.
Yeah, okay then. Well, hello everybody. My name is Joran Dekker, as you can see in the picture. I'm working at the Regenboog Group in a drug consumption room and in a drop-in center. I'm also working in as a volunteer at the peer project of Unity. Willem is also working there. So, and we give drug educations on parties. For me, this whole webinar thing is a little bit new. So I do not, yeah, I'm a little bit nervous for this. I'm gonna try to be, I have 20 minutes. So I will talk for 10 minutes about heroin and for 10 minutes about cocaine. I will try to rush it a bit through because I noticed I want to say a lot, but I do not have a lot of time, and I heard you had a lot of questions. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. After I'm done with the whole presentation, I will answer all your questions. All right, let's start. Yeah. So we can see here, this is...
You can probably go in the slide. Can you do that? That you share the slides, then it's better to see.
But
you just go to presentatie. Otherwise, you leave it like that. No, it's easier.
Leave it like this, or yeah. Okay, I will do it like this.
Fine.
Fine. All right. What we see here is a picture from a newspaper from 1904. I thought it was nice to add this. We used to have our own cocaine factory here in the Netherlands, which is a little bit weird to think about it now. What I will talk about today is what I said, heroin and cocaine. I will do a small introduction. I will tell something about the effects, the methods of consumption, risks and harms. It's not completely how Roberto explained it, but I will do my best. And I will give some harm reduction tips if I didn't give them already in the methods of consumption. All right, heroin, it's known as a depressant, a painkiller. It's part of the opioid family. And the key features of opioids is that they are painkillers. They attach to the the opioid receptors in the body. They are responsible for our perception of pain. Yeah, so it has the poppy plant. Here we see some nice poppy bulbs. The black stripes you see on the bulbs, means that it has been cut, and they take, that's called opium, and from there you can retract opium, codeine, morphine, and thebaine. We're going to talk about heroin, as you can see in the left corner of the chart. Also, it's good to mention that speedball is a combination of both cocaine and heroin, which is a common cocktail to inject. Also, at the bottom you see synthetic opioids. These are often more stronger or longer lasting. For example, methadone and tramadol are very important to know, and fentanyl is one of the most potent opioids at the moment. All right, so what are the effects of heroin? I will not go into detail about all the others because obviously time. Good to start some time. I'm going to talk about positive effects and negative effects. Positive is relaxation, euphoria, pain relief, and feeling of well-being and safety. With the feeling of well-being and safety, I mean more like the mental painkiller, so to speak. How one of people I know who uses heroin describes it. He says, I'm feeling like a square with all the pointy edges, and when I use heroin, then it scrapes off into a nice soft circle. So he doesn't have a lot of stress. So those are positive effects that people want to reach when using heroin. Negative effects would be narrowed pupils, an itch. Some people report that at the place of injection, they can feel a kind of an itch. Eventually, this can spread over the body. Nausea, especially the first couple of times, people report that they feel nauseous. This is also a way to not get back to heroin, because the experience was just, I puked all the time. Also, very important with opioids are the lowered breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. These are also very important to know that people have the tendency to fall asleep. When I'm talking about overdoses from opioids, I have the tendency to talk in phases. You have a first phase, and that's that somebody is nodding off. And the second phase would be that somebody is sleeping and getting blue lips. And this all has to do with the amount of breathing and with the heart rate, blood pressure, etc. And we try, the use room where I work, we try to keep everybody who's using heroin in phase 1 maximum. And else we would call an ambulance. If somebody is in phase 2 and doesn't go back to 1, then all right. And craving is very important. This is the need to take more. So consumption methods. There are a couple. You can smoke it, inject it, sniff it, eat it. You can also, basically any way with heroin, there are a lot of possibilities how to get it into your bloodstream. Here you see a picture on the left. There's somebody, this is all from our drug consumption room. On the left, there's somebody preparing a shot of heroin in a syringe. And on the right, we see somebody using the method Chase the Dragon. I will tell something about that more. People use a piece of aluminum foil. They put a little drop of a little piece of powder on the aluminum foil, put a lighter underneath, and then they smoke. They suck up the smoke through a tube. The powder becomes sort of a little bit liquid, and so it flows over the aluminum foil, and they chase the dragon, chase the smoke. It's also possible to roll it in a cigarette with some tobacco, which would be more unhealthy for the lungs. So the big upside of smoking is that you there's a smaller chance of getting an overdose, a way smaller chance of blood transmittable diseases. But a big downside would be lung diseases like COPD or lung cancer, eventually. Injecting, this is, I guess, the most well-known method when you would think about heroin. You can do this in a couple of different ways. The most seen is with heroin is intravenous. That means in the vein or in the muscle. Intravenous gives a quicker effect than in the muscle, but when you shoot in the muscle, it takes longer for the heroin to be out of your body, so you don't have to take more eventually. So upsides would be that from injecting, you can get this heavy euphoric feeling. We call it the flash. From smoking, this is not really the case. So that's why people are a little bit like, I'm not going to go smoke, even if I barely have any veins left. And that's also the downside of injecting. You can ruin your veins eventually, but also the risk of an overdose is way bigger, and the risk of blood transmittable diseases. I guess the method is not per se how am I gonna say this? Injecting is not per se a bad thing. People who inject have the tendency to live longer than people who smoke on the condition that they use clean materials and that there is some form of supervision in case of an overdose. So there's also sniffing. With sniffing, it's you should maybe sometimes we hear it sometimes in the Netherlands on the news that tourists took white heroin instead of cocaine, and they get an overdose. And that's very common with sniffing, that people do not have enough information about heroin that you can still get a proper overdose, and it hits quite as hard as shooting heroin. You can also digest it orally. This is mostly in the form of methadone. Yeah, so now I will explain some short-term risk and long-term risks. I already explained some with the methods of smoking and injecting. So short-term risk would be obviously an overdose, and also a little bit obviously the chance of blood transmittable diseases. Long-term risks are a bit bigger. Physical and mental dependency, risk of social isolation. People have the tendency to use heroin alone instead of, for example, cocaine is more a social drug, and people who use heroin have the tendency, when they're high, they keep to themselves. Also, the thing is not knowing if you're sick because of pain depression. You might have an ache in your back, and you are suppressing this pain by heroin, whereas maybe there is a tumor growing in your back. This is a very crude example, but it can happen. Unknowing linked pregnancies. Women can, the menstruation for women can stop during long-term heroin use, but they can still get pregnant. So it takes a while before you recognize you're pregnant. Lung diseases in case of smoking, like I said, lung cancer and COPD and others. And problems with the veins eventually, the collapsed veins. Also, I forgot to mention the risk of an abscess when you're shooting. An abscess is an infection under the skin, and it can grow as big as a golf ball, and it's full of bacteria. And if that comes in your bloodstream, it's very dangerous. Always advise people to go to the doctor as quickly as possible. Yeah, so harm reduction tips and some bold statements. Naloxone saves lives. Here in the Netherlands, it's, as far as I know, illegal to administer. For me, as I work in the drug consumption room, I understand that in some countries it is possible. I'm daring enough to say that we have some naloxone around, and if it happens, I would use it, and I would advise anybody who's working in this field to have naloxone with them, or at least in the office. Provide clean materials. Clean materials reduces harm immensely. Also, by providing this, we can have a conversation about drug use, about safety tips, hygiene tips, etc. Don't stigmatize. Smoking is a way of using. Injection is also a way of using, and it doesn't say anything about the person itself. And also, like I said before, smoking is not better than injecting. And watch out with grapefruits. Grapefruits have... I put my alarm at 10 minutes for heroin are finished. But let me finish the grapefruit part. Grapefruit has a lot of interactions with many different medications, also with cardiac medication, etc. And for opioids, it's, that it can last long, it can make the opioid last longer. All right, so cocaine. I'm having an alarm next to me, so I know that I'm not taking too much time. All right, cocaine. It's a stimulant, an upper. It works mostly on your dopamine and your noradrenaline receptors. Dopamine is you know, part of your happiness, part of your brain, and also it's a big, how do I explain this? Yeah, it helps with your motivation to do things. All right, it is retrieved through a chemical process involving coca leaves and kerosene, and it's mainly made on the high altitudes of South America, as maybe that's common knowledge. So here we see a kid happy with leaves, which is also kind of sad in a way. Yeah, so the effects are positive effects: feeling of energy, feeling of confidence, with alertness, sexual stimulating. There are also a lot of reports that, or I can use this saying maybe, too much blow the cock doesn't grow. That basically means that erectional dysfunction, etc. Nice, Catherine. All right, euphoria, and it becomes easier to talk a lot. And I guess a lot of people mostly talk about themselves. Yes. Negative effects would be paranoia, higher blood rate and pressure. You can also see that people who use cocaine mostly are a bit pale. It's because of the veins being very thin, so the blood pressure is high. Cramps and muscle ache, mostly this would be the day after when you're grinding your teeth and there is a muscle ache in your jaw. A headache, nausea and feeling dizzy. Aggression, this is mostly in combination with alcohol or during the coming down, when there is no dope around anymore, party's over or whatever. The reason is people might be agitated. And there's a very rare, the excited delirium syndrome. I find this a very interesting thing. I'm not gonna talk about it a lot now. I would advise you to Google it because of time. All right, consumption methods. The most famous ones would be sniffing and smoking, at least here in the Netherlands. I'm not sure about cocaine in other countries. And injecting and eating is also possible, but I will explain what most people would think about that later. Sniffing. Sniffing cocaine, there are two types of cocaine. That would be base cocaine and cocaine hydrochloride. Base cocaine is basically the cocaine that you get when after the production. Then in South America, they turn it, the manufacturer turns it into a hydrochloride, which makes it possible that it can go through the membrane of your nose, and it's also dissolvable in water. So it would be used for sniffing and injecting. Base cocaine, I will explain later. You cannot sniff that, but base cocaine, I will explain it now. Base cocaine is also known as crack cocaine. I will not explain too much about that now. If there would be any questions, I'm very willing to explain it, but there's not much of a difference. Sniffing. So here we see a picture with some materials, mostly spoons on the left, and on the right, these are called bullets. It's basically a canister, which underneath there is a turning wheel, and you can open it to put your dope in. And on the right side, there is another wheel, which you turn it around, the dose falls into the dose holder, and then you turn it again and you have a dose ready. Always with sniffing, use your own material. There is still a possibility of contracting a hepatitis C virus, and what's also an interesting tip is to sniff towards the side of the nose instead of to the septum. This will prevent the septum from dissolving, or how you would call it. Yes, and also a good advice is to blow the nose, like after every line. This can be after a minute, because then the cocaine is already being absorbed in your nose. Also, eventually after a session or every day, it's advisable to dissolve some salt in water on body temperature, and then just sniff that water in your nose to clean everything properly. This will keep the nose moist, because mostly you get a very dry nose after long-term cocaine use or any other stimulant that goes through the nose, basically. All right, smoking. I will go immediately to a nice pipe collection. I was saying something about base cocaine. Base cocaine is the cocaine that's being smoked. You can see here some pipes. Best advice for people who like to smoke base is that they use a pipe that's detachable, so it makes it reusable. And at the other side, there is still some residue left over in the pipe, which can be re-smoked. There are also people who use, like on the left down corner, you see this nice soda can. It is possible, but it's not as useful as a proper pipe. There's also, there can also be some kind of discussion about, because you're scratching basically the inner side of the tube of the pipe if you're cleaning it, which releases metal, and therefore I put this glass tubes, pipes with the glass tubes, which might be more healthy. Again, don't share your pipe, only if somebody's putting a lot of cocaine in it and you have some left. You can have the leftover fiadu, so-called. Cocaine, injecting, basically the same tips about heroin. Mostly you need, no, I'm not gonna, because I do not have enough time for that. No. Oral eating, like I said before, it is possible and you might feel something, but if you don't like money, give it to people who do. I guess in our field, we do not see a lot of people who are eating oral or taking orally cocaine. Then short-term risk, overdose. This would be very different from an overdose of heroin. You would get a heart attack, or you would see seizures. The seizures may look like an epileptic attack. If you're working with people who are also drinking a lot and you're not sure if they're having an epileptic attack because of alcohol abstinence, then it's going to be difficult to see what's going on. At least that's my personal experience. Overheating is a thing, and psychosis, either drug induced or because of a lack of sleep. Drug induced because of a lack of sleep, there's some difference. Mostly after being awake for 2 days, then you will start to see things that, or hear things that aren't there. And later on during that session while being awake, it can become a real psychosis. All right, long-term risk, behavioral change. It has been, there's evidence that that cocaine actually is changing your brain. I have some notes in this presentation, which I think will also be sent eventually, where you can see a source. It is in Dutch, but the sources he uses are also in English, which basically shows that cocaine also alters the brain. Cardiac diseases, like heart rhythm disorder, etc. Mental dependency. The lefamisole cut is, it can be very high, and lefamisole is a medicine that veterinarians use to deworm their animals. It's as also in higher amounts, it destroys your autoimmune system and can cause these necrosis on body parts. Very scary, but it's always good to test your cocaine if it's possible in the country where you come from. And it can cause homelessness eventually, just like which comes with the lifestyle. So some general harm reduction tips and another bold statement. Use clean materials. Try to provide clean materials. Try to have an open, non-stigmatizing conversation about either the method, about hygiene, etc., etc. How much is somebody using? What's the reason for somebody who's using? Drug use is a way to cope with stress, or in some more difficult cases, trauma or depression. What I noticed in the drug consumption room is that most of the people who come there are having a trauma from their childhood, either sexual abuse or physical abuse, which causes a lot of stress for them. So, and here the chemical formulas of heroin and cocaine, left heroin and on the right cocaine. Thank you for listening. I hope it made some sense. It was very quick, I guess. Yeah, and if you have any questions, let me see, how do I open the chat now?
I have opened the chat. I don't know how it works, if then everyone gets it also in the other rooms. But in principle, people can just, I think you can all raise your hand or put it in the chat indeed. Or we just indicate it shortly by saying something. I would have a question directly to you, because you have mentioned the different ways of using, and I remember what I shortly told in the beginning, that once the base coke came up, so the crack, that let's say many of the traditional users who also combine cocaine and heroin by injecting suddenly started using crack, and they just had a bad influence on their physical health and well-being, because suddenly they were much more hectic, and they are constantly looking for a next one. So I wonder, when you are having this, when you are in the drug consumption